In the outlandish world of professional wrestling, we find real life superheroes throwing dukes while pridefully taking spectacular moves for the roar of an approving crowd. But in the land of best bout machines and modern day messiahs, there's a true art form in selling the reality, the danger of their matches, and making the audience feel exactly what they're feeling. The sting of a chop, the thump from a bump, that emotion amongst the commotion is the most important part of any wrestling match. Over the years, we've seen many considered to be the greatest sellers in the business. Guys like Mr. Perfect, Dolph Ziggler, Shawn Michaels, and Brock Lesnar, when he felt like it, are all celebrated by fans for their ability to make their opponents look as good as possible. But they did so by making a great big spectacle of it, flying all around the ring, bumping like absolute madmen, and ultimately selling to a theatrical extreme. When it comes to who could sell the subtle intensity of a wrestling match as a calculated, exhausting battle of endurance, there was no one better than Hoi and welcome to Reed Creative, where I've got my sights set on the Hitman and the intricacies behind his stellar selling. Now, I chose Bret Hart specifically because he always kept his physicality within the realm of reality. He presented himself as a man in a genuine fight. And it's important that we briefly look into the era in which Bret was performing. Having come up in his dad's territory back in the 1970s, kayfabe was still alive and well, and wrestling was presented as a legitimate tough guy sport. There'd be flashy characters here and there, but the in-ring action remained grounded in reality. Most matches consisted of drawn-out holds and submissions, all with a focus on wearing down your opponent bit by bit before hitting that one final big slam for the pinfall finish. And Bret was a member of the Hart dynasty, trained by his father Stu in the old school art of stretching, long, punishing holds that gradually wore down the opponent and zapped them of all of their energy, all the while ruining their limbs with pinpoint accuracy. As wrestling evolved into a showcase of pageantry, Bret maintained his grounded style of performing and added subtle theatrics to enhance his in-ring presentation. Instead of violently flailing and bumping around like he's in a bouncy castle, Bret would often keep his flat back bump simple and just roll around in a heap. As seen here when taking multiple jackknife power bombs from Big Daddy Cool Diesel. While others opted to sell like a starfish, ready and raring for the crime scene chalk to be applied, Bret emphasized the physical force of the move along his back, bridging his body to alleviate pressure on his lumbar while his arms and legs ultimately buckle, letting the audience realize that whatever air was left in his lungs had been brutally ejected from his body. He's trying to get back up, but while his mind is willing, his body is unable. As a result, Diesel comes off looking like an absolute monster, even after losing the WWF Championship just moments ago. The crowd booing incessantly while hoping that Bret can get back up. Another aspect of Bret's selling worth mentioning is how he would bump off of rope-based moves, like when taking a stun gun across the top rope or snake eyes in the corner. Instead of bumping to the ground or selling on his feet, Bret would always hold the ropes while he took a bump. Now, some could consider this a lazy way to take a bump, but within the context of a wrestling match, it makes perfect sense for him to grab the ropes and attempt to right himself. If you, for instance, were knocked off balance, would you keep your arms down and accept your fate? Of course not. You'd desperately grab at anything nearby. It's a natural response of falling to catch yourself at all costs. And from a character standpoint, the Hitman was always a very prideful individual, on screen and off screen. So for him to try and catch himself from falling, but ultimately failing to do so, not only puts over his opponent for taking it to him, but it also puts over Bret's own resolve and the natural instincts that he possesses to keep himself upright. After all those years spent training in the dungeon, you think Bret's just gonna let himself fall? Come on now. Let's look at 1 year later, Survivor Series 1996, where Bret Hart absolutely stuffed himself on a Stone Cold Stunner. Now, the stunner has always been a move open for selling. You can flop around like a crash test dummy a la The Rock. You can soar with the Eagles like Scott Hall. You could even freeze like a literal Stone Cold Stunner a la Montez Ford. All of these are very fun, but animated ways of selling the sheer destructive force of the already established Stone Cold Stunner. But this is 1996. Austin just adopted the stunner a few months ago. It's only now beginning to get over with the crowd as a snappy yet credible finish. Enter the Hitman. Bret just absolutely eats this stunner, slamming both his knees into the mat along the way to really showcase how vicious the maneuver can be with how normal his sell is. Instead of bouncing everywhere he can, he's just there, crumpled into a ball, writhing around in pain, while seemingly holding his jaw in place. On a fuzzy CRT telly, you would be convinced he just lost a tooth or shattered his jaw completely. Bret's brutal bump told you just how believably devastating a stunner could be without engaging in cartoon physics. He made his pain so incredibly relatable that you couldn't help but grab your own jaw and give it a massage out of respect. And more than that, Bret's own selling went beyond taking just bumps. He sold exhaustion so brilliantly as well. Now, don't get me wrong, Bret's cardio is second to none, but deep into his matches, he would be gasping for air, his mouth left wide open just like your DMs. His punches would lose some snap to them, more wild than precise. But he was never afraid of looking weak because he understood the importance of battling against the odds from a storytelling standpoint. Selling is not just about making your opponent look strong, it's about putting your match over as a whole. Wrestling really is an art form, and the Hitman truly understood that. The ring itself was a canvas where the performers could paint any story they desired. Bret just so happened to focus on realistic portraits. He made you relate to the pain, made you feel like you were in the ring yourself taking all these brutal moves. And he left you thinking just a little harder after all of his matches. Finally, let's compare Bret's selling to that of one of his biggest rivals, another one of the best to ever step into a ring, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. While the Hitman was always portrayed as a straight-laced in-ring competitor, HBK was much of the opposite for most of his career. He was a flamboyant, cheeky git who always had a penchant for tremendous showmanship and bravado. Not just in his goated entrance attires or his absolute bop of a theme song, but in his animated selling. In his younger days, HBK would fly all around the ring just to make his opponents look superhuman. But that was the difference between their understandings of wrestling psychology. HBK was young and brash. As a result, his matches were fast-paced sprints that wowed the audience for the athleticism on display. Meanwhile, Bret's matches were slower-paced marathons, steeped in realistic displays of endurance and resilience that wowed audiences all the same. In Formula One terms, HBK was like Ayrton Senna, an absolute natural that you couldn't help but cheer for his generational talent. While Bret was the Professor Alain Prost, the calm, calculated excellence of execution whom you had to respect. It's why they became such perfect foils for each other. Even as far back as the late 80s, when both Bret and Michaels were tag team performers in the mid-card, their methods of psychology were well established. This clip of Hulk Hogan shows exactly what I'm referring to. Hogan's upset about something or other. He kept muttering, "That doesn't work for me, brother," and pushes Shawn away in rage. Shawn, the young gun who knew sharing a segment with Hulk was an incredible opportunity for his career, bounced back a mile and flew into a nearby wall just to put over Hulk's incredible strength. Hogan then comes across Bret as well and pushes him, but Bret, being the more experienced, hardened competitor compared to Michaels at that time, sold the push more as just that, a big push from a strong guy. He didn't fall over against a wall and knock over a bunch of brooms, he just got caught off guard by Hulk Hogan lashing out at him. Both ultimately were telling the same story very well with just their bodies. Goody Two Shoes Hogan is angry and acting out of character. But HBK reflected the flashy cartoon exterior of 80s WWF, while Hart reflected the nuanced, tough foundation that wrestling was founded upon. Now, I could drone on and on about Bret's match work and just how phenomenal his in ring psychology is, but I digress. All in all, yes, professional wrestling is the silly sport where macho men in tights compete for belts that can't actually hold up their pants. But the nuances behind selling can take a goofy matchup between giants of the industry and transform it into a truly brilliant, realistic story of David versus the Goliath. Unless, of course, a hint of envious sabotage between two legends turns a dream match into a comedy spot fest. But that's a video for another day. And on that bombshell, it's time to end. This is the Voice of the Village Recreative signing off.